I'm Matt. I do a lot of videos about my pedal board and walkthroughs on it, and I've noticed that the question I get the most often, probably of any other, is about powering all of this. So I thought I would do a dedicated video on that rather than just answering it in text every time via the comments. So here is my board. As far as I can remember, it's still the same as in my most recent pedal board walkthrough video, but I have technically 16 pedals on here, and I think like 13 of them are drawing power. So I get a lot of comments that are asking how I power all of this. And what I'm using is just a Voodoo Lab Pedal Power 2 Plus, which is kind of one of the longest running and most common powering things. There's new ones now that are, have more current available, and they're more kind of suited for the high draw, like digital pedals that are out now. But this is just like the classic Voodoo Lab pedal power thing. Comes in a box like this. The reason I get a lot of questions about it is that when I clarify that that's what I'm using, a lot of people are like, how are you powering 13 pedals off of it? So that's what this video is about. All right, so I've switched over to a screen capture thing here because there's a lot of math and research involved in doing this. If you just want to play guitar and have some pedals and not have to do math or research, this is probably not something you want to embark on. But the Pedal Power 2 Plus has, certain specifications, and per the manual here, the outputs, there's 8 outputs on it, and most of them give 100 milliamps of current. The middle two are higher, they're 250, but this is what I'm working with. So it only has 8 outputs, so you would ordinarily only be able to do 8 pedals. But if you add all that current together, that's like 1100 milliamps of current. And my 12 or 13 pedals only require, like 1,000. So I'm under that. I just need to figure out how to apportion all of this out to the different pedals in a way that like everyone will get powered. So your first step is going to be figuring out what the current draw of each of your pedals is. And my favorite resource for that is the official user manuals, because you can presumably trust the people who built the pedal to actually know. So usually it's like the last or second to last page of a user manual. You can find specifications. And in this case, this is the Strymon Blue Sky, which is my reverb. And it requires 250 milliamps of current. And it's 9 volt center negative, which I'm not an electrical person, so I don't really understand any more about this than what I needed to set up my board. But all of my pedals are 9 volt center negative. If you've got something that isn't, that's more advanced than what I'm dealing with here. But all of mine are this. So the Strymon requires 250 milliamps. I now know that. The Nemesis Delay, which is my other probably highest current draw pedal, sometimes you can just scroll down and they have it on their web page, which is right here. And this actually brings up an interesting point, because a lot of pedals include a power supply, and you can't necessarily go by what the power supply has, because this Strymon power supply supplies 300, but the pedal doesn't need 300, it only needs 2. So you're looking for actual power consumption. And then if you can't find a manual for it, like some of the boutique, like handmade pedals, a lot of times just a Google search, you'll find forums where people are asking. So one of my drive pedals is a Timmy, and someone just posted on the Gear Page, which is one of my most favorite websites, asking for the current draw on this. And they happen to have gotten a response from the builder of the pedal weighing in that, 8 milliamps is about right. So a lot of times, if you just a Google search will usually turn up good info on this. So I have gone very organized here and made a total spreadsheet for all of my power draws. So you can see we just looked up the Blue Sky 250. We looked up the Nemesis, which was 200, and then we looked at the Timmy, which was 8. I've filled in all these values for all these pedals. And then these are the outputs of the Pedal Power 2 Plus, which are all, 100, and then the 2 middle ones are 250. So the easy version of this is when what it needs is what's available. So we looked up the Blue Sky, it's 250. This output has 250, done. Like, just plug that in, that one's powered. Or Certain smaller pedals are right around 100, so I have like my ditto looper, needs 100, has 100, done. So that's the easiest version is when it needs exactly what is supplied. So like these two can just hang out on their outputs and they're fine. After that is where it gets complicated. So for example, all of my drive pedals require just like 8 milliamps. So black box, probably about 8. I have a question mark because I haven't been able to find like perfect information on that. Timmy's about 8, according to the builder. I have a Tube Screamer Mini that's 7. I have a compressor that's 15, and then my noise gate pedals 22. These are all really low current draw pedals. Putting one of these on an output that has 100 available and I'm only using 8 of it feels like such a waste to me. So the first thing that I did is take all the really low draw pedals and put them on one output. So the way you do that is with a daisy chain, which I use a True Tone multi-plug 5 cable. So I've got like 3 of my drives, my compressor, my noise gate all on one single output thing. And there's other brands that make daisy chains like this. I'm not like necessarily plugging this one. It's just the one that I happen to have. But all of these can get summed onto just output 3. And I've added them up and they're still only drawing 60. So I mean, I could almost even put more pedals on that if I had a bigger daisy chain. I don't need to, but so the only caveat with this is that the daisy chains can cause noise if you've put pedals together that don't play well with each other. And that's just trial and error. You can't really know whether a pedal is going to play well with others until you try it. But as a rule of thumb, these are analog pedals that are fairly simple. They're just drives or compressors or whatever. I wouldn't put like a digital delay in here, even assuming that you could fit it somehow. So that's the only thing I've tested all 5 of these with the daisy chain and they don't appear to produce any noise. So I'm okay doing this. But if you plug one in and you get like some hum, you might need to take that one back out of the daisy chain. So step 1, daisy chains. And then the rest of these are using various adapter cables from Voodoo Lab. And you can get third-party versions of this stuff, but because Voodoo Lab makes the Pedal Power 2 Plus, I feel good having their cables for it. So one thing you can do, my Nemesis needs 200. So I've taken 2 different 100 milliamp outputs and I've summed them together using the current doubler adapter here. And this is the most critical thing to pay attention to, not this one. The voltage doubler adapter does something totally different, and I'm not an electrician. I don't fully understand what that is or means, but that is not the one you want. You need a current doubler adapter, which will take 2, 100 milliamp outputs and put them into one 200 output, which 200 is exactly what my Nemesis needed. So I just summed these 2 together with one of those adapters and put that on there. So step 1 is you can use a daisy chain to put a bunch of things on one output. Step 2 is you can go kind of the other direction and combine 2 outputs to power one really high draw thing. And then this is sort of a relative of the daisy chain thing, but you can take one output and split it to just 2 pedals using this one, the output splitter adapter, which takes one and splits it out to 2 pedals that, together are under the provided current threshold. So this output gives you 250. So I put my Micropog 160 and my Polytune 50 for a total of about 210 on here, and they're still under that limit. So this is where the math and me keeping this insane spreadsheet comes in, is that it has to be under these limits. Like, I couldn't put something on here that was more than 200 or something on here that was more than 250 or whatever. You will potentially melt something or destroy a pedal. I've actually melted AC adapters by trying to draw too much current from them back before I learned all this stuff. And then you might or might not have noticed I've got my Proco Rat kind of snuck in down here. That's just by virtue of the fact that most tuner pedals have like a power through thing that you can power one more pedal off of. And so I just stuck the Rat off of the Polytune. So technically there's 3 here, but the Rat draws hardly anything. And then if you've been following all of that so far, we got daisy chains, we got current splitters, we got current doublers, and then I had a weird situation here where I have these two combined into a single 200 output using this guy. And so they're combined into 200, and my source audio orbital is on there drawing 140, which leaves 60 that I'm not using. So I did something that I tried to research ahead of time to make sure would work, and I didn't really find anything, so I just tried it, and it seems to be working. But I have combined these two, then split them again. So I'm using this one to get 100 and 100 into a 200 thing, and then I've plugged this into it to split it back out into 2 pedals. I couldn't just put them each on one channel because this needs more than 100 and this needs less than 100, but I've summed it, then split it again, and then they're happily hanging out side by side at 140 and 50. So the total draw of all my modulation pedals is less than 200. That seems to be working well. That's an adapter into another adapter into your pedals, which is kind of, that felt like I was pushing the limits of how I'm involved to get here, but it worked. And then if you've just flat out run out of available current, I bought the Dunlop Echoplex delay, which needs 240, and like all my outputs that would have possibly powered that are totally already spoken for. So I'm using the Courtesy AC adapter on the back of my Pedal Power 2 Plus, which is just a whole another plug that's back there to power the Echoplex delay. And then one more little note regarding this courtesy outlet, just because it took me some trial and error to really perfect this. It matters what size wall wart you use here if you're going to power a pedal off of the thing and still hope to fit your whole board into like a case of some kind. So I couldn't fit my pedal train into its soft case with like a giant wall wart here. So I figured out that the source audio, this is the adapter that was included with, I think, the Nemesis, is like the flattest one that I could find. It's only about an inch or so, maybe. And so that's, if you can find kind of a flat wall wart instead of one of those like really thick ones, that's an advantage here. And then another thing is that if you've got your Pedal Power 2 Plus mounted underneath a board, there's a certain amount of space between where that outlet is and like where you need it to be. So I found this weird little gray thing from like a hardware store that just happens to be the right length. And so I just took this and plugged it into that outlet, and now the outlet is like right on the edge where I want it to be. So hopefully any of that is helpful. Again, I am not an electrical engineer, and I only know what I'm talking about to the degree that I've been able to learn about this stuff from like product manuals and the internet. But you know, when I started putting this board together, it pretty quickly became apparent to me that I could fit more than 8 pedals on here and could not power more than 8 pedals from this. So that's just my, 3 years worth of trial and error figuring out adapters and doublers and daisy chains and all the different ways you could power this many things. I didn't touch on, some of these don't require power, like my volume pedal is passive and these are just switches for the delays. So that stuff doesn't matter, but I still have, I think it's actually 14. I've been saying 13. I think there's 14 pedals on here counting the secret noise gate. And they're all, I've been gigging with this weekly for years now. It's they're all comfortably coexisting in this arrangement. So anyway, those are some ideas if you need to power more pedals off of a smaller power source. Hope that helps.